welcome to our Cybersecurity Forum. This forum is going to take a little bit of a different take on what cybersecurity means. This is really directed at C-level people to understand and give a perspective on building transformational cybersecurity strategy that creates value for organizations while protecting its most valuable non-human asset, its data. Forum, we're going to address the ubiquitous nature of cybersecurity issue, how to set and achieve expectations from your cybersecurity strategy, what to expect from a Chief Information Security Officer, and how cybersecurity adds value in business terms. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about what the MSS-BTI is. We were established about 6 months ago in June to provide knowledge platform opportunities for companies that are seeking to do their own transformation. So our goal is to provide people what they need in order to transform their business on their own. That's what we're about here. My name's David Lee, and I'm the Executive Director of the BTI. We have a couple of panelists here that are my great pleasure to know these fellows. I've gotten to know them over the last couple of weeks and months. We have Dr. Roméo Farinacci immediately to my right. He's the Senior Security Consultant with Terra Verde Services, specializing in security program development, risk management, security architectures, and risk assessments. That said, I met him when we were on a panel at Grand Canyon University, and he was developing the master's program there. And I also met him, surprisingly, when I went with my daughter to Comic-Con, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, there was Morpheus right behind me. Tell me about your Morpheus adventures and you get involved with these kind of Comic-Con and events, but what do you do there? I think it's very interesting what you do in those panels.
So what I've been doing and what I do almost everywhere is try to promote cybersecurity anywhere I go. So at the Phoenix Comic-Con, I was on several panels promoting cybersecurity or security in general, and we use approaches like Star Wars and Star Trek, and we explore how they use cybersecurity or how they use certain technologies that we somewhat use today and how we can bridge those gaps. And so we, again, provide education, just using metaphors, but using metaphors from a Comic-Con perspective.
Okay. And sometimes you're in Star Trek gear too, right?
Yes, I have a Mace Windu outfit as well. It goes with the bald head.
So yeah, we're going to geek out here today. I also have here with us Kim Jones. He's a 31-year intelligence security and risk management professional with expertise in information security strategy, governance and compliance, security operations, and risk management. Professor Jones is a former Chief Security Officer who has built, operated, and/or managed information security programs with financial services, defense, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the best thing that I learned about him is he considers himself the Mary Poppins of security. Do you want to explain how you and Mary Poppins are correlated?
Yeah, that was a nickname my son gave me a few years ago. And there's a couple people I know who've actually worked with me as I've done this sort of thing. I have a tendency to be asked to do what are politely called transformational security roles. What that really means is the platforms are on fire, the SEC may be investigating, we've had a breach, we've had a hack, and things are falling apart. Politely put, I'm the guy who gets called in and parachuted into that big pile of stuff, and as one of my old bosses used to say, yeah, give me a little runway and a little time and I'll give you 50 acres of well-fertilized rose garden instead of a big pile of manure. Well, my son, when he was leaving high school going into college, said, you know, Dad, you tend to do these jobs and switch jobs every 4 or 5 years. Either you get the company stable and it sells, or you get the company up and running. And usually around year 4, once the disaster's over, people tend to forget why they brought you there. And the institutional memory of the crisis has gone away. And all of a sudden, then everything old is new again, and we start to go back to old habits and think that things are okay and lighten up. And my son said, basically, what happens is you're Mary Poppins. After you put the family back together, you open your umbrella and you fly away over the London skyline. I've never forgiven him for that remark, but yeah, it stuck.
Good. And you're also over at ASU West, and you're teaching there, you're designing the program there?
Yes, I'm actually the director of ASU Cybersecurity Education Consortium. After my last gig where I rebuilt in the program for what is now the largest credit card processor in the world, I decided that it was time to actually give back and help build for the next generation. So ASU is building an interdisciplinary program that's heavily grounded in reality instead of theory, creating critical thinkers and guys who not are just designed to work in your ops centers coming right out, but guys who 5-10 years from now will be us, that, you know, or reporting directly to us, guys who have those skill sets from day one. So it's a real lot of fun.
And then immediately to my left, we have Wayne Hagstrom, who is MSS's own. Wayne, you have a unique background when it comes to security. What can you tell us about that, Wayne?
I do. So my interaction with data security is a little from the opposite side. I formerly worked with the DoD and the U.S. Air Force, and I provided support to the State Department and other government agencies. So a lot of our work relating to cybersecurity was around how do you protect the environment around where the people are working, and actually getting the people to be aware of what is going on in their world around them and the value of some of the data they have. So we were fortunate that often our systems were secured from the standpoint that they weren't connected to the internet. They may not have been connected to the outside world. They may have been heavily encrypted, but there were still a lot of people that were trying to get that information out.
And I asked Wayne to tell us a story, but he told me if he did tell us some of the stories, he'd have to kill us afterward, right?
Yeah.
So how long did they say you had to wait before you could talk?
My agreement is 75 years from when I left the job. So if I remember anything when that expires, it'll be a good world.
All right. So again, we're going to take this from a C-level perspective. I know that there's a lot of conversation about cybersecurity and how to do it and what the needs are and the demand is for it, but I'd like to look at it from the top. And what is it, how does it transform your business in today's world? So Kim, I'm going to ask you first. When we discuss business transformation at the BTI and the major changes that will impact an organization from now and into the future, when we look at cybersecurity, how does cybersecurity result in business transformation?
And we had a bit of this discussion earlier. From my perspective, saying cybersecurity results in business transformation still begins to place cybersecurity outside of the business. I never, as a CISO, want to be the cause of you having to do something radically different from your business and stop you from making money. I want to be a part and integrated into your DNA. So as you look at doing other things to transform your businesses, as you look at data-based driven economies, as you look at monetizing your data, as you look at going outsourcing, offshoring, et cetera, all I'm trying to do is to make sure that you understand that just as there are financial risks, there are different headaches with employments, there are different headaches with legal ramifications, et cetera, that you understand the security risk that exists there as well. When I think security transformation, what I'm really honestly thinking on my end is the integration of that portion of risk into your DNA every single solitary day. Not that it's they're looming over your head to the point of, oh my God, what's going to happen? You know, that's my job. But that it's also a part and parcel of the decisions that you make and becomes a factor into your risk calculus. So I never want to be the cause of massive business transformation, but I damn sure want to be a part of that business transformation. And a lot of what I end up doing is, or used to end up doing, was driving organizations in that direction. Anything to add?
No, you said it. A lot of organizations today are really looking at cybersecurity as a department on the side, as tools, resources that we may leverage when something happens, instead of considering and having that individual like yourself at the table when we're talking about what's the vision, what's the mission for the organization over the next 5-10 years, and how does everything that we have to consider, including cybersecurity, going to impact that.
Yep.
Because when I look at data, I look at that as part of my strategy as a company, especially if I'm a data-intensive company like a retailer or an online company, and I have to look forward and say, how am I utilizing that data? Big data is always a topic now. When I worked with American Express, we were always looking at how does that data become an asset? How can we use that? How can we be safe about that at the same time? But that has to be part of my strategy going forward. It also works into how I'm forecasting and how I'm looking into the future. So in my view, I would think that you would have to have the people who are in charge of the data and in charge of protecting the data at the table when you're creating your strategy. Yeah?
I would push back on a little bit, not at the
Okay.
end statement. The idea of data as a part of your strategy, let's be very realistic, last 5 years, period. Prior to 5 years, data was just stuff that we had to figure out where we store it, where we keep it, what we do with it. Data as asset, as true intellectual property that can be monetized, last 5 years. And unfortunately, what we end up dealing with on my end as a security professional, what I see, is the strategy is let's monetize our data. That is the extent of the strategy that most people put out there. We've got this stuff. Hey, we can make money with this stuff. Let's do that. Nobody really starts thinking about how, ramifications of doing that, what it means in terms of storage. You know, we've got at least one attorney in the room. What it means legally if I try and do this within the environment, plus the overhead associated with how I then share those things cross-platform and then give you access to it so I can monetize it. So my pushback is I don't see a lot of people and a lot of business out there who truly have a data strategy other than we've got data, let's make money with it. And that's part of the problem.
Well, because they've been collecting it for years.
Yeah.
But it matters too how you got the data, doesn't it, in terms of how you can use it.
Not just how you got it, but it's also, and I'm going to ask you to chime in here. I have this thing where I say we need to make sure that we're very precise about our terms from data versus information versus intelligence. Data are stuff and facts. They don't change. Information is data that I put in context so that I can figure out what its meaning is. Intelligence or data or information that might not be readily visible given what I've got here that I can further extract. You know, the example I use is a 10-digit number. I can throw a simple 10-digit number out there and it's not going to change. If I put dashes in certain places, etc., it may have meaning. If I put a dash after the third number and a dash after the sixth number, I now have a North American phone number. Now I have some information. If I add other pieces of data or information, like say the first 3 digits are 301, that 301 is the area code for Mid-Maryland, and I happen to mention that I lived in Mid-Maryland for a certain amount of time, you may gather the intelligence that that might be one of my old phone numbers back in the 90s. I use that example all the time. So for me, it's a matter of there are always things given the processing power and the data that I've collected that allow me to extract information and intelligence from it. And as we look at large processing engines, my ability to do some prognostication with that data has increased tremendously. So I can extract various things with it, but what we don't necessarily think about is, okay, what can I do with that? What should I do with that? What am I allowed to do with that? Are there other implications associated with that that are not just security issues? Because if now I put all of this innocuous data together and information together, and all of a sudden use that processing power to say, now I can be predictive on whether or not you have cancer or some private piece of healthcare information, which incidentally did happen to Target in the early 2000s when their sales engines and their online search engines predicted that a 15-year-old girl was pregnant and started sending her advertisements for baby clothes and diapers before her parents knew that she was pregnant. Now you have protected health information that's being generated from this innocuous data.
Yep.
What are the implications of that? How do I secure that? What can I do with that? Those are the type of strategic decisions that I'm not seeing, questions that I'm not seeing asked by, forget the security guys, but by the businesses as well.
Oh, no, you said it. You said it. My question would be, how do we get to a point where we understand that we have that kind of data? What am I looking at? You know, and so I can understand that this is the kind of data I need to protect. Before, but it's just data. You know, when it turns information, that's when we say, okay, what kind of information is it? Sensitive information, PHI information. That's when we have to learn about integrating that into the protection mode, into my world of technical, how I'm going to manage that data flow. So it's hard to understand that transition from just the data to information, and then knowing that now we got to stop and we got to protect it. Not just protect that information, but protect the source of that data and protect how we use that data to predict and do other things with it.
And a lot of that gets down to questions being asked before it gets to guys like you and I.
Right.
It's about when you get past the, hey, we have this stuff, let's make money with it, what types of questions do we want to ask and put together? What types of information and intel do we want to extract? And even if I extract that information or intelligence, what do I do with it? If we have those questions in that logical discussion, yes, depending upon the answers, now we figure out when we come to the table or what we have to do with that. But in many cases, I've seen companies just pulling intelligence out of their data and acting on it rather than strategically, going back to the term you used, David, planning and forecasting and thinking about it. So I would love to see a strategic conversation regarding use of data within an organization. I'm sure it's happening out there. I haven't found it yet. Be very blunt with you.
Haven't found it yet.
When you look at some of the organizations you've worked with, do you see that in today's date and time there's a level in the organization where this kind of vision of what to do with the data stops, right? We've seen over time there have been breaches that people lose laptops, right? They lose thumb drives with key information on it. There seems to be the gap between the security level that the leadership knows and the key people knows down to the working level of how do they protect the value of some of the things that are collected.
That's a good question. For me, it really comes down to communicating to leadership. Actually, leadership down. Let's put it this way. It's leadership down. So we have to put in these controls and understanding what the value is of the data and how to control that data. But what organizations are not doing right now is tracking data flow, period. A lot of them don't even know where their data is going and why is it going in certain places. So to even get to the point where we're understanding, okay, this data is going here, what's the value behind that? So then there's certain other mechanisms and risk that we have to put in place and other controls we have to put in place versus a laptop being lost, what do I do with it? Don't have to worry about it if we have, no value or if we have it encrypted or, so it's hard for me to answer that question. I don't have to lean on you from the very executive level to understand how you guys explore that value and then explore the risk and controls around that.
And again, this gets back to the strategic look, Romeo. It's, I think the challenge we have is valuation of the data to begin with. And I'll use a simple example. For the benefit of the podcast, there's a coffee mug sitting here in front of me. If I told you right here, and you've worked in the world, that coffee mug's worth $10 million. Okay? And I don't want that coffee mug to leave this building. You have some idea, any of us here has some idea as to what makes sense reasonably for me to protect that $10 million asset and prevent it from leaving here and walking out of this building. I could even go a little further and say, I just want you, ma'am, to be able to access this coffee mug and nobody else. And all of us here don't have to be in security, have some idea as to what not only we can do, but what we would be willing to do to protect that $10 million asset. Now I want to tell you that there's a bunch of stuff being stored in different areas at its base level in ones and zeros in various things or pieces that you carry around every single solitary day that you can make money with, but if I were to ask you what the value of that data was, any of you, CEOs, et cetera, you would have a hard time, I would submit, telling me what that value is. You may be able to say, well, it's worth an awful lot if you've already thought about monetizing it. If I'm a security guy and coming up, you're going to say, oh, he's just going to tell me I want to do stuff with it and I want to protect it and he's going to be a pain. So it's not worth anything. And you'll tell me that to make sure that, yeah, we've had this conversation. Yeah, it's not worth anything so that, you don't make me encrypt it. So I think that problem is not a disconnect between executive level and user level in terms of what we should be doing and communicating. I think the disconnect is while we understand the data has some value and that we can monetize the data and we don't want the other guy or gal to get the data, we still haven't determined, okay, I could tell you how much data we have in the system. Any IT guy or gal can. How much storage am I using and, what's the average size for this? I could probably tell you what's here. The executives who are responsible for helping define what that value is, Again, not getting straight answers. They are not getting, that's not fair, not getting strategic level answers and analysis of the data valuation. And that truly makes our job harder from an implementation standpoint. If I make you do two-factor authentication and sign in and change your passwords every week, et cetera, for something that is inherently worthless, like maybe the $1.50 coffee mug that's sitting in front of me, you're going to be annoyed. But if you truly understand and believe that it's worth $10 million, if I told any of you as senior business executives that I want to spend $10,000 and inconvenience you so that $10 million worth of assets don't walk out your door, you're probably not only going to write me a check, you're going to say, you can really do that for only $10,000? You sure you don't want 20? It's that valuation conversation, in my opinion.
Well, now I know the value of that cup. I'm not sure I'm going to let you have it. That cup is priceless to me. So Roméo has been contributing to the MSSBTI for quite a while, writing a series on cybersecurity. One of the interesting articles that you wrote was that you should not consider this an insurance policy. Cybersecurity is not an insurance policy. Tell me a little bit more about what you meant by that.
This is conversations I have with everyone as I work with Terra Verde Services and the organizations that I go through. Again, cybersecurity is placed on the side. Cybersecurity is just put in place in case something was to happen. Instead of looking at cybersecurity as integrating it within our culture, as Kim had said earlier, we have, I've worked in, various organizations, and we're always talking about the product or the service or even the patient, they come first, right? But I can guarantee you when I talk to these nurses, they're not just thinking about the patient, they're thinking about ways to improve productivity. They're thinking about ways to make things easier in their workplace. They're thinking about ways to provide more education so I can do the things that I want to do better. But they're not thinking about security. And I want them to start thinking about security as well. Everyone is responsible for security. So when you're doing whatever you're doing, think about how can I do this more securely? Is what I'm doing right now the best method to do it? We've had in hospitals where they'll send off messages to a distribution list of 100 of people in this distribution group and not knowing why, who was on this list. They're just sending it because it's a process. Right, so they understand the process is there, it's simplified, but is it secure? Is it the right thing to do? They're not asking those questions. And that's what I want people to do is integrate that thinking into the organization to know that security, if you hear me talk a lot, I always refer to security as like brakes on the car. It's not there to stop you, it's there to make you go faster. If you didn't have brakes, you'd only go a mile an hour, because that's as fast as you can put your left foot out and stop yourself. But knowing you have brakes there, knowing that you have that available, you can go as fast as you need to because you have control over that vehicle. And I want people to think the same thing. When you see these pop-ups on these screens saying you can't go to this website, this is what people do, disconnect their current corporate Wi-Fi, go to guest Wi-Fi, do a refresh and see if they can get there, right? Instead, it should make you ask, it should make you ask the question, do I really need to go here? Ask security. I need to get to this website. Let security ask yourself, help you ask that question. Do you need to? Let me open the ports or whatnot. Our job is not to say no, as we had a conversation earlier, but it's there to make you think. If you really need to get to these locations, we'll enable you to do so after we let you know what the risks are and so on and so forth. But again, we want you to think, everyone in the organization, to think about security like it's second nature. Like I want to improve my education. I want to improve the patient's life. I want to improve the security culture within my organization. So don't look at it as insurance. I bought it. I got a CISO over here doing what he's got to do. We got compliance in place. We're ready to go in case something happens. That is just, last minute stuff where cybersecurity in itself can increase productivity at the same time. So look at it from a strategic perspective and how you can enhance your organization by implementing these things in place. Again, like brakes on the car. If I have the right kind of brakes, I can be more productive and go faster in my vehicle.
And I want to dovetail off of that in terms of what you said in terms of trying to make the process better, et cetera. And I wouldn't put some of the onus or blame for some of the challenges you have with your security professionals back on my profession. I spend a lot of time, have and continue to spend a lot of time also speaking and educating on security. And the first thing that I tell every security professional is, you don't understand. I'm a businessman. I'm the chief security officer, but I'm a businessman. I have a vested interest in making sure my paycheck doesn't bounce. And I do that by ensuring the maximum value to my shareholders and stakeholders in any business that I go in and I do work in. And if you're not taking that attitude, you're taking that attitude that, and I used to use the same brakes on the car analogy, if you're not taking that attitude as your starting point, you're your own worst enemy. And I've been asked the question a couple of times, you know, what is the first thing that you do when you go into a new organization as a CISO? And I say, I buy a $500 Starbucks card. And I said, you buy, if it's a large organization, make it 1,000. But I buy a $500 Starbucks card, and I find and speak to all of the influencers in the company. I didn't say all the chain of command. I have to start there because nobody necessarily has time for a meal, but everyone can grab a cup of coffee, and Starbucks sells more than coffee if they don't drink coffee. And I say, you ask them 3 questions. You know, what is it you do to generate revenue? Notice I didn't say make money because nonprofits still generate revenue. Okay, what keeps you up at night? And if there's one thing that I can do to make you sleep better, make your life easier so that you can do your job better, what is it? If you do that to the influencers in the company, you will quickly realize within the space of a couple of weeks that, okay, here are the big problems, and even more importantly to start with, okay, this is what this company truly does. Yes, hospitals save lives, but what do they do to generate revenue? You know, planes fly. Getting something from point A to point B via aircraft is actually fairly simple once you get the aerodynamics done, but doing it to make revenue and make money is actually quite hard. So figuring out how the company generates revenue and then what are the stumbling blocks in the way, if we're not asking that as professionals, then we're part of the problem. And if businesses and cultures look at us as part of the problem, it's why we're being pushed off to the side, lumped in with compliance, factored on insurance, versus the, if you work with me, not only will I allow you to do it better, smarter, faster, I'll do it in a way that allows your losses to go down because competitors aren't nipping at your heels, your data isn't being stolen, and you can maintain that thing, that wonderful thing called competitive advantage. Because again, I like the fact that my paycheck doesn't bounce. And if we have competitive advantage, it's going to be a good day. Mama's happy, I'm happy, it's a good day. And we need to do more of that, I think.
Agreed.
I have a question for you. So, like I said, I've worked at American Express. American Express has always been very good about protecting the data and making sure employees understand their role in it. Of course, everybody has their times where something went wrong or whatever, but I remember every year I had to take a day out just to review how I can affect data as an employee. And I wasn't one of the ones with a lot of sensitive information or anything like that, like customer service people or anything like that. But they were very good about making sure I could do that. But it seems to me to be a massive investment to do something like that. Does every organization need to do it at the same level, that kind of level, or how do you scale it, and how do you determine the level that you need to really have that kind of program and be constantly on top of your employees?
Good question. Coach Jeanette, me and my boss have been asking for the last couple of weeks now, you know, as we go through trying to sell these products, you know, how mature is an organization in their security? How mature is the organization in communicating the value of data, communicating and understanding where data is going and where is it? That's the first key. And how complex is the culture? Okay, so there are some organizations where I've worked in there and it just wasn't right for me, you know, where I'm trying to make the right changes, but I can't communicate the right changes because they are so ingrained into the legacy perspective, the legacy mindset. I'm gonna bring my own thing, I'm gonna do my thing and make it happen, and I'm gonna think about security on a side note. Some of those organizations, you gotta start small, you gotta do something to make it fun, you gotta do something to, you know, engage these individuals. Other organizations that I was at, I'm not gonna say the names, big organizations, it's a lot easier. So where do I start? How big do I go? Sometimes it's a small organization may cost more to do so than a large organization, just because of the maturity of the organization as far as them considering the security concepts and the security and data and things to that effect. So as a CISO in these different organizations, it's not about cost. I wouldn't put cost on it. I would put change, you know, and making that cultural change. And how do we do that and how long is it going to take for us to get the message across?
Okay, so you said you were going to say something controversial today. You just did.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Have to find it somewhere.
Did you remember when I said I'm a businessman? I live by making sure I do what I do within my budget. Oh, it's always about cost, my friend. And I sit there and say, look, every hour of training that I make the company go through is a loss to the company. And there's no way on God's green earth that I'm not going to factor that in terms of what I'm doing. You did that to rile me up. I know you did. So no, it is absolutely about cost. From my perspective, what you're talking about in terms of the time and the massive effort, we need to put some level of education or an awareness out there. The different ways that we do that are not, it's not an issue of what, it's how. Is there a way that makes sense for the size of your organization, the relevance of the data, the need, the way people communicate, et cetera? And I'm always looking for ways to say, how do I do this in a more cost-effective way that doesn't take you out of the line for an hour of time, which if I've done the how we make revenue, I can tell you exactly how much that is costing the company in terms of productivity and productive hours. And yes, I used to do those calculations as a CISO to figure out if I can shave 10 minutes off of this training, I've saved the company X amount of money. Here's a hint. I can use that savings to offset the cost of the system that allows me to implement when I go make my budget justification in front of guys like you, which I do regularly. And going back to the example you gave, the value proposition for Amex, if you recall, trust and security are an inherent part of the Amex brand. So for Amex, this was an investment in its brand. It goes to market. As if you're with Amex, it goes to market from a peace of mind brand standpoint. They value their security as a part and parcel of the brand that they offer their customers. Shout out to USAA, because several of us are former military, and for the same reason. USAA has no standing banks anywhere in the world. They have 3 ATMs worldwide, yet they serve, think about it. If you're a military member, guys who are currently sitting in the cabinet are USAA members. So you have protected data of military servicemen all over the world in terms of insurance, loans, access to cash, et cetera. So security is a part and parcel of their brand. It's in their DNA. So they take a hellacious investment in that because it's who they are. But in terms of just education and implementation, you riled me up, man. In terms of education and implementation, cost is always a factor for me. And if I can find ways to say, well, regardless of what, even if it is a part of your brand, regardless of how big and integrating your DNA it is, every minute I take out of production is a loss for you. And if I can find ways, I'm going to have to do some things that are going to create loss. I wish I could just, plug you guys in at night and say, okay, here's everything you know, and I'm sure you do as well. But if I can minimize that loss and maximize that message, there's trade-off there, and I'm always looking for that trade-off. Cost does matter. Okay, I'm done being riled up. Good job.
But you said a word that gets me going, because you said it's a change.
Yes.
Everything's a change, and managing that change has a cost to it. But at the same time, this is where it becomes transformational, in my view, because you have to change an organization if you want to make them a more secure organization. And the amount of time and effort you put into that change is an investment. At the same time, doing that well makes that investment pay off a lot sooner. And so, just a plug for change management, as a person who does that, that should be on top of all these type of programs. I don't know if you guys have dealt with that and had to deal with the change management side of it, but have you spent time saying, how do we move the organization? How do we move the people to be more compliant, adopt the changes, et cetera? Have you had that kind of experience?
I don't focus on more compliance. I focus on looking at the culture. And culturally, I'm going to get a bit zen. Culturally, I don't think anybody openly does stuff that they believe is inherently not secure. I'm assuming most of you locked your doors for your car. I'm assuming most of you, make sure you don't just leave your wallets or your stuff lying around. And we do that inherently from a self-protection standpoint. The challenge that we have in terms of changing the environment is when we say, okay, what you're doing is probably insufficient given the value and the risk that you have. So what I am attempting to do, you're right, it is transformation, it's change, but what I'm attempting to do is I'm attempting to inject into the DNA of this environment that there is a need to do more. Not because it's illegal, not because somebody says we have to, not because the idiot weird security guy is going to yell at me, but because it's important to who we are and just as important to protect those assets and resources as it is for me locking my car door when I left the parking lot to come here. So yes, it is change, but the biggest piece of that change for me begins with understanding how the culture works, what the culture is trying to achieve, and how I integrate into that culture versus knock that culture upside of the head coming in at 90 degrees and saying you have to do this. So I'm always looking to try and understand, you know, what is culture? It's the intersect of people and organization, and how organizationally and the people work, and how how they communicate, how they're used to operating, and how I can achieve maximum efficacy in terms of what I put in, be it technology control, be it process control, with minimum disruption. Because disruption is good if it is managed appropriately and it disrupts to make things better. But even if it disrupts to make things better, if it's managed inappropriately, it's going to cause chaos in the organization. And you know this. There's always a little bit of dip before you see that benefit. You know, the objective is to minimize the depth of the dip and the duration of the dip so that it's very short, quick, and then we quickly see the benefit.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So Kim, I'm going to go to something. We had a pre-interview, which was fascinating for me because we just sat in your office and I asked like 2 questions. You guys just went off. So, but one of the things that you really focus on is how organizations, what their expectations are of their CISO. Can they impact what they expect from their strategy? How does the person you bring in affect what you expect from your CISO, and how can organizations be sure that they're getting what they need?
Yeah.
This is the conversation. Right?
This is the kind.
This is the meaning for this forum, I tell you, right here.
Yeah.
That's why you have these 2 complete disparate guys sitting up here because of our approach to CISO, you know, and that really is what the conversation that he's talking about really went to. So it's beautiful.
I remember that. Excuse me. It's holiday season, so I'm going to use the holiday season example. If you go to a party and you meet a stranger and they say, well, what do I do? And they say, well, I'm a doctor. Well, I'm in academia, so the first thing that someone says is MD or PhD for me. But even if it's an MD, it's the, okay, what's your specialty? Do you know, are they an MD? You don't even think DDS or DVM, but what's your specialty? Am I a pediatrician? Am I an oncologist? You know, am I a chiropractor? Am I an orthopedist? When you think doctor, you automatically understand that doctors are different and have different specialties. We all have the same underlying, hopefully they pass medical, they all have the same medical school training and have the same underlying understanding of anatomy and physiology, but they have very different specialties and do very different things. I would submit that what we have failed to realize collectively is that when you say I'm a chief information security officer or a chief security officer, that businesses and leadership aren't asking the same questions. There are very, very technical CISOs, people who, frankly, you know, they love to keep their hands rolled up in the sleeves, coding, et cetera, and I've seen lots of organizations that are very, very technically driven. You know, the early days of Netflix, Bill Burns, when he helped build the Netflix system. A lot of what he was doing as the Chief Information Security Officer focused around how do I make all this new technology work? And he was just as in the weeds as an IT engineer or security engineer. Now, I haven't been that guy in decades. Yeah. You have what I call business CISOs, which were more that business liaison role, where you've seen people who are in the line of business, understand a subset of the business, and are liaising with a larger corporate headquarters, and playing that UN détente role where they're advocating the needs of my particular line of business to the headquarters and then advocating the needs of the headquarters to the line of business. You know, what's the definition of good liaison? Someone who annoys people on both sides 20% of the time. You know, the same thing. And they play that liaison role. They're good in maintenance roles as well. You see truly strategic CISOs whose job is to sit at the chair around the table with the COO, understand what your strategic direction is, put in a strategy, and then run the programs down, you know, appropriately. There's the subset that, You know, I put myself in terms of that transformational CISO, you know, the platform's on fire, the SCC's coming, find a way to rebuild, stabilize, operate strategically, and do a little bit of all of those roles, understanding. I used to tell people it's the difference between Patton and Eisenhower, Schwarzkopf and Powell. You know, Schwarzkopf's a very capable, charismatic, dynamic leader, but don't have him lead the piece. You know, plain and simple. He's not the guy you want around the table after that. After that happens, pick up and get someone who's more good at stabilization. The challenge that we have is, one, as a profession, while we are that way and we talk amongst ourselves that way and we can identify ourselves that way, you know, I've known Roméo for just about a year, maybe
Couple of years.
You know, a couple and a half. He is decidedly very technology and operational oriented. Doesn't mean he's bad as a CISO. He's a very, very accomplished security guy. You know, if I thrown him into some of the roles I had, you know, no disrespect, your head would have exploded. You know, conversely, I'm a very transformational guy. I don't do stabilization. You know, you put me in some place where the objective is to move the bar about 1%, you know, I will go crazy. You know, I like making things better. But as you advertise to the world, you're looking for a CISO, and you're looking for an experienced CISO. And the job description that is put together for someone looking for the technology CISO versus the strategic CISO versus the business CISO versus the transformational CISO are exactly the same. So you get a bunch of people with the same set of qualifications coming into your environment that may not meet your need. And if they're not old and gray like I am and understand what my strengths and weaknesses are, they don't know the questions to ask you to say, okay, I know what your job description says, and if you look at my 5-page resume, yeah, I'm more than well qualified, but as I talk to you, I'm not the guy you want. You need him. And I think we need to be better at going past the headhunter, let's just go get a generic CSO description and throw it out there, and sit back and say, what do you really need and what are you really looking for? Because if you hire me at 51 years old and at 30 years worth of experience and say, you want me to install firewalls? Yeah, no, I'm not going to do it. You know, despite the fact that it's the job description you put out and you've given me the title, but I'm not that guy anymore. The day I start reading firewall logs, you know, the second coming has happened. You know, it's been a while. Versus you know, yes, you're well above that level, but you enjoy and would be happy to dig in a smaller organization like that. Go for it.
Yes, I do.
And I would send you to him.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes into building a cybersecurity program from the ground up, this is before fires happen is where I come into play, where I help organizations, you know, to establish their DRP, their IRP, their risk management program, their vulnerability assessment program, getting those tools in place, installed and tuned, and working with the team to make sure that we are, you know, educated and aware of what we need to do in order to make this whole program efficient, how to build that security awareness training program and get the whole entire organization involved, and, you know, doing all those roles. That's where I shine, you know. That's my baby right there, you know. So again, it's just like my opportunity to work with Terra Verde is going to these small and medium-sized organizations and some large organizations where they do lack a lot of that cohesiveness. I like to come along and bring that cohesiveness from HR and legal and how we all need to talk. So when it comes to like GRC, I'm the really RC guy. You know, I'm there to make sure that we get those controls and those pieces in place. But then, like you said, sitting at the way up there table and only looking down and saying this is where everybody should do things, I get bored. So,
Really?
I get bored real easy. But what we'll love to do, and what we over time and like to write more for you guys, is to help communicate that gap that we have as far as, you know, just in general, cybersecurity professionals by themselves are being, you know, overshadowed from a security engineer in one organization, a security engineer in another organization, completely different from their needs. Organizations are just putting out these, you know, generic job descriptions and not getting the right people. They're saying that there's no professionals out there looking for jobs, or they got the professionals saying there's no jobs out there for me because the descriptions are not reading what I can provide. You know, so it's really communicating that separation and actually putting into those job descriptions, actually first having the executives understand what they need, you know, for an individual to come in and hit the ground running or just to shine, and then be able to communicate that in those job descriptions to get those guys. So putting out the right net to catch the right fish.
Yeah, and I'll caveat it very slightly. Yeah, first understand what you want. Okay? truly understand what you want. We won't get into the disconnect between what you want, what you say you want, and what you really need. Not that we found that a time or two. That exists across the board. But truly get an understanding of what you want and make sure you're marrying that up. Get a little specific in that. Don't just hunt for and say, well, so-and-so executive recruiter says this is an excellent job description, or they've talked to me for an hour because, look, we've all been there. I've been on both the giving and receiving end of that. And unless you know to ask the right questions, and I've been recruited and say, well, have you asked this, and have you asked this, et cetera, you're going to put forth your best foot forward to try and get what you think is the best qualified guy, and you'll get the most experienced guy at a reasonable price point who is absolutely wrong for your organization. In this market where there is negative unemployment for CISOs, I used to say that the employment for senior security professionals is at -2%, which means we're stealing from one another and there's not enough of us to go around. And that's still true. It is still true. There are still organizations out there who are hiring CSOs and letting them go, or they're walking away within less than 18 months. That tells me that this is a real problem. And I actually do some advising work for a small headhunting firm, and we're in 2 organizations right now trying to replace CISOs that they've let go after 18 months. Either one they've let go or one's walked away, that the fit just wasn't there. So take some time and make sure that, I'm a doctor, okay? Don't hire a pediatrician when you need a vascular surgeon.
And don't pull the job description off the internet and just put it out there. That's
and particularly now, it's a seller's market. It is truly a seller's market from a CSO standpoint. I'm now down to once a month because people have finally realized I enjoy teaching the next generation and I enjoy helping build the program. But I still get adverts coming in once a month saying, hey, you want to go back and sit the chair? And when I left my last job, before I went into academia, there were a couple of companies that were heavily recruiting me for not unsubstantial amounts. And I spent a whole lot of time saying, I'm not the fit for you, and walked away. Not because it wasn't wasn't a good company. It's just I'm not the right guy. But I'm old enough to understand what my needs are. So, again, pediatrician, vascular surgeon. Figure that out at your end. Hopefully, the CISOs on our end will begin to figure that out. But in this seller's market, good CSO is happy to walk away from a job that's not a fit, because there are other opportunities out there, believe me.
So as a member of an executive team, how do I know which end of the spectrum I should start at?
What I would say is, you want or I'll take it?
Go ahead and
All
I'll
right.
finish off.
Please.
because you don't care very much about this topic.
I have no passion behind this whatsoever. What I would say for a couple of things. First, let's start with, why are you trying to hire? If this is a first-time CSO hire, which there are still happening out there, why are you trying to hire? What is the motivating cause that's causing you to create this position and do this? That's the starting point. Now, if you've had a CISO out there, then step back. I mean, truly, I tell people, truly step back, okay? And let's talk about and work with the CISO before he or she leaves and say, okay, what are the roles and responsibilities that he or she's done? What are the things we need them to do in the future? And let's also be very direct internally. What are the things we liked? What are the things we didn't like? What are the strengths that they had, both in terms of skill set and capability, as well as operating style, that we want to see repeated? What are the weaknesses and challenges that they have that we need to see bolstered and definitely don't want to see in the next candidate, both in terms of skill set, operational style, cultural fit, and start taking some time to marry those up. And I would submit that that is an executive conversation, regardless of where you place the role. And I've got some strong opinions as to where it should be placed. But those conversations too often don't happen at an executive level. And too often they're handed off to HR and said, yep, we need one, go hire Korn Ferry or somebody else. Okay? Not to pick on Korn Ferry, but go hire somebody and go get one. He's going to work for you. You're the hiring manager. Go pull us back and go do that. To this day and age, that still happens. So the answer to the question is have the conversation. Spend more than 30 seconds on it and ask those questions of yourselves internally. That's where you start.
I like to add to that. His overall concept is do your research, right? So that's the first thing organizations should do is their research. Now, what some organizations don't realize, there are resources out there to enable you to do research better, and that's what's really trending right now over the next year, virtual CISOs. And you can hire these individuals 2-3 days out of the month, week out of the month, just to sit at that table with you. So you can get their perspective, because some of these small, medium-sized organizations, they can sit at the table, but they still have no idea what they're talking about, right? They really don't know what they're looking for because they don't have another CISO sitting there saying, this is what we do, this is how we can go about doing it, this is how you can strategize in security programs or what you need. But getting a virtual CISO in place can help you do that, can help you, get those questions stirring and getting those ideas going that you otherwise would not have on your own. So that's something I really have to plug out there.
No, you're absolutely right. In this shared service economy that creates Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb for small to mid-tier companies, a virtual CISO may be the way to go. It's the equivalent of like you put a lawyer on retainer for certain things and you bring them in as needed. The cautionary note there is still make sure that if you go with a company that is actually marketing virtual CISOs, that you understand a little bit about the person you're hiring. Most of the guys doing virtual CISO work are of the quality or caliber that Roméo and myself and others. There are a few people, well, I've been doing this for 5 years and I'm hanging out my consulting shingle and I'm going to call myself a virtual CISO. So do your homework still. But yes, it is a very good option out there.
Yeah. I want to jump in something. I'm not a technically minded person. I understand. Even Roméo, you've had to send me some advice from time to time on website stuff, but if I get into it, if somebody like me gets into a position where I'm not a technically minded person, maybe I'm not even in a technical business, but I have data to protect and so forth. What are my as the leader of a company, what are my obligations to my shareholders? What do I need to actually be aware of in terms of how I'm best serving my shareholders by putting in this type of plan? You and I talked a little bit about this, and you wrote an article on keeping your CEO out of jail, right?
That is job one.
It's job one. It's for me, it's communication and transparency, to those shareholders and stakeholders, and getting a third-party organization to conduct a risk assessment to come and evaluate where you guys are and help you understand what your data is doing. Because a lot of CISOs that I've come across don't know what they don't know. So being able to communicate and have that transparency with your shareholders is hard. So your responsibility is to understand what's going on in your organization, communicate. From the top down, the importance, the value, the significance of what needs to be done, and the value behind securing that information, and then that we're doing it. And communicate that. For me, the first thing is that communication, transparency, and getting understanding of what's going on in my organization as far as where the data is at.
Dovetailing off that, and again, it's because of some of the jobs that I've had. I start with, the larger answer is you're the CEO. So let's understand a few things. Your obligation to your shareholders and stakeholders doesn't change in security. It is to maximize value to your shareholders and stakeholders. You're the CEO. That's what you do. That doesn't change from finance to HR to security, et cetera. That's your only job. Okay? You do that by strategically implementing, strategically executing things that are designed to generate revenue so that you can actually provide that value. That doesn't change. I don't need you to be a technologist. I need you to make sure my paycheck doesn't bounce. Now, I don't ever want to have a CEO who says, I have to go back to school and get a computer science degree in order to actually understand cybersecurity to do my job. Please, I'm a college professor. Please, God, don't. Please don't. So overall, your objective, that doesn't change. Now, when you get down to, I think, where your question is going in terms of an implementation standpoint, and how do I do this in a way that's effective or efficient? You know, I tend to advocate, and again, it's because of the jobs I had. You know, there are 4 phases of coming in terms of me working as a CISO. You know, baseline, triage, grow, and enable. Baseline, okay. There's basic stuff that we ought to be doing, and in the absence of, you know, an ability to move slowly and quickly, and the platforms are on fire, or look, I'm just getting this together and I don't want to be breached, please God help. Okay. That phase starts with you're hiring me as an SME. I'm going to take a very quick look around. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Is our data unencrypted and I can expose my customer database on the internet? That's probably a wrong thing. So you know, let's figure out what those things are. And that's a very quick, fast, you know, a lot of cases it's coming in. What are you basing this on? I'm basing this on I've been doing this for 30 years and trust me, your host. Okay, we've got to do something differently. That's not the optimum solution, but if I need fast, then I'm going to rely on those pieces and say, this is good, this is bad. Triage says, okay, let's get maximum bang for the buck to get us to good. If my risk level is way up at the ceiling and I can do this one thing and drop it down to about the table level, that's the first thing I do. And if I advocate for one thing, that's the first thing. The next thing I advocate for the second thing. So my job at those points, and by the way, this can be weeks, this can be months. And in the organizations I've been in, I've gone from baseline, in my last organization, I went from baseline to triage in 97 days. We did 72 very tactical triaging things to bring the risk level down in my first 97 days. So it's not long, but you know, it's a lot of just, okay, you know, you're hiring me for my expertise, the platform's on fire, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Now that we've stabilized and say, okay, we're not bleeding data, we've got the fire extinguishers on, now I step back and let's say, now let's grow strategically. Because I know there's some things here I haven't put in that are jerry-rigged in, you know, how do I make those sustainable? What do I need in terms of bodies and resources? That also gets to, how do I get out your way? Because while this worked, it's inefficient to get you know, to your sales pipeline for revenue generation, et cetera. So how do I do this better to get out your way? And again, maximize my ability to make sure my paycheck doesn't bounce. The last phase of that, which very few organizations get to, but I love bringing organizations to, is truly enablement. You know, it's truly to say, not only how do I get out your way, how do I make you more competitive? Now, how do I do things that actually not just maximize the value, but to, you know, by getting out your way, but to truly contribute to our bottom line? When I left one of my first companies, I had turned security from a cost center to a profit center. And in my last year, I gave money back to the IT budget and still did all my strategic objectives. Okay? But that takes, you know, that's a strategic CISO. It takes us getting to the point where we're past putting the fires out and truly looking at it strategically to say, this is where you want to grow, this is how I'm going to grow, and this is how I'm going to make it better. It's hard work, it can be visionary, but you can get there. So I got to an enablement standpoint where I was giving money back to the company. You know, those for me are the 4 phases that we go through.
How do I enable you, coming in from a leadership point of view again, how do I enable you to do your job better? And second question to that is, and I think you answered this a little bit earlier, is are cybersecurity and creating a responsive organization necessarily separate concepts?
I'm going to start, and I'm going to lateral that last one to you, Romeo. How you enable me is truly, I mean, there's this phrase that goes around in my area called executive buy-in. You know, for me, it's a matter of, look, I'm not here doing the things that I do just because I've got a sadistic streak. There are easier ways to make money, trust me. And I'm not doing them.
Although you may have a sadistic streak, I think. Yeah.
I'm a security guy, I'm a martial artist, I'm an ex-soldier, yes, I do. Anyway, I'm not doing them, you know, from a standpoint as I like to see, you know, make people uncomfortable. I'm your agent. I implement your policies, your processes. You know, I'm doing what I am doing to try and help you achieve your objectives, not only from business, but from risk exposure. If there is any perception that we are unaligned, then I fail. More importantly, my job gets a damn sight harder when I'm down in the trenches. So the first thing I need is absolute alignment. If you view me as I'm that guy you had to hire to stay out of trouble with the regulators, I've lost before day one. And my biggest headache and the biggest failure of most cyber professionals is a lack of true executive buy-in. Okay? Particularly in this market, you're paying me a hell of a lot of money to come in and do what you want me to do, and then you're going to sit there and complain about what I'm doing to your peers, the board of directors, and the executives who work directly for you. You've cut my legs out from under me at about the neck. Okay? That is the biggest thing you can do for me to allow me to make things better for you. The second biggest thing you can do for me gets down to what you said earlier, Roméo, is communication. Okay? Look, I've made my career and I've built my life on knowing that I know exactly two things, exactly two things on the earth. The first one is that my wife and son love me unconditionally despite my flaws. And the second one is I can be wrong about absolutely everything else. So I need that level of communication and understanding. I need to understand, I need that level of access to you to make sure that I'm truly driving your objectives, can teach you why I'm doing things, can understand that maybe there are pieces at your level that I'm not privy to that I need to step away from. I know I'm going on, but this is a valid point. I'm going to tell a quick story. My first boss, was Clyde, my first boss in my first gig, hired me in my first CISO gig. I credit him to teaching me how to be a junior executive and then a senior executive, giving me the room to run, giving me the transparency. He never ever lied to me, but I also understood that there were things he couldn't tell me. And I remember I had been a month in the gig, and I was asked a question by the executives. I said, okay, this is what we have to do. My boss responded back, says, good communication. I understand why you're doing what you're doing. I need you to back down from this stance, and I can't tell you why right now. And I was okay with that. There are things at his level that I'm not privy to, but I needed that level of openness and transparency. He says, okay, I'm comfortable not knowing everything that's going on. I don't want your role. I don't sit at that level. But, I got it. And I easily backed away. And then a month later when things were out in public, says, this is why I asked you to do that. That level of transparent communication made my job so much easier, because I could walk into his office anytime and get his attention, understand I would always get an honest answer, even if the honest answer is, can't tell you right now. That level of transparency and that level of support makes my job easy. And by making my job easy, I can better integrate into your cultures and your companies. Sorry.
Go. Re-ask your question.
I think, yeah, he hit my question 100 times over.
It's
Yeah.
about the responsiveness piece in terms of the responsive organization.
Well, I want to take it a little bit because, okay, so we talk about, at the BTI, we talk a lot about being a responsive organization, which is being adaptable, being able to handle disruption quickly, being able to manage change well. So, because we think of transformation not just as a one-time change, but creating an organization that can transform over and over and over and over again and do it with less energy, less resources, and be responsive in that way. But if I'm looking, let's say I'm at the beginning, we've done all this stuff, we got the right CSO, we got our strategy in place, all the things that we've been talking about, and this, Roméo, this is going to you. Now I'm looking at making my organization a safe harbor for customers, for partners, for anybody who I'm bringing their data in and I'm going to start utilizing it, or I'm just holding it for my own purposes. How do I get started? What are the steps that I take to make the biggest difference, and how do I learn to mature my organization the best way? How do I get going? Hire you, I know, but other than that.
Roméo,
Oh, you know what I'm
Birdie,
thinking.
there we
You
go.
know what I'm thinking. Oh, MSSP was in my head when he was talking.
There you go.
A computer's going to do what you tell it to do. It's not going to do anything more than that. It's the people we got to start with every time, Being responsive is having our individuals, our workforce, our clients being responsive. I just came from working with an organization where they have their clients provide feedback, provide updates, provide, hey, we have a virus going on the website. Hey, we have this going on. Hey, we saw this over here. This industry, is that going to impact us? Having that communication, those open channels. Having organizations like FBI's InfraGard ACTRA program, and integrate their threat intelligence and using threat intel decision making within your organization so you're aware of what's going on out there before it impacts you. So taking your cybersecurity program from a reactive whack-a-mole state to I'm listening to what's going on in the environment, I'm looking at the trends that's happening, and I'm preparing for worst case scenario, so that if it does happen, I'm not spending millions and millions of dollars repairing it. I'm just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars preventing it or deterring from happening. But again, it goes also to the training and awareness for the individuals, not just your employees. We have organizations, healthcare, doing these notice of privacy access, but you can do so much more within your organization by communicating to your clients what you're doing and how they can help and be a part of that community within your organization, so that that proactive state, that responsiveness is going on, and it's beautiful to see that happen. Again, I just came from an organization and I see it happen. I'm like, you're telling me something that I can read about. Now here it is, clients providing that feedback to that organization so they can make those changes as necessary. So for me, it's just getting down to the people and anyone who's a stakeholder, shareholder within your organization, and being aware of that, and then starting with the culture, so that's the culture change.
And tactically agree with you 100%. Looking strategically and looking at responsiveness as what we would colloquially call an organization that is agile in ability to actually take advantage of market trends and potential revenue opportunities. I advocate that your security team, you've hired the right CISO, your security team is by definition the most responsive team you have, period. Because what I would tell people is, and I used to say this, in fact, my guys gave me this saying when I left my last gig. I used to say this, guys, making lemonade out of lemons is easy. The job of any good security professional is to make lemonade out of 2 apples, a grapefruit, and a kumquat and make it look easy. Every single day, I've got a new guy banging at the door with a new level of attack. I've got a new sales guy who's just sold something we've never done before in an area of the country we've never seen before and made commitments that we've never had before. And my job isn't to tell them no or to say, what drugs were you smoking and why aren't you sharing when you did this? My job is to tell them how we get it done in a way that doesn't increase your risk. If the answer to that is on Google, that's not the problem I'm fighting. Okay? And we do this every single day. So we know the technology, we know the processes, we know your business. We are, by definition, if you do those communication things, if you do that, that executive meshing and placing it in your DNA things, if you do that, and you've hired the right people, Romeo's the right people right here. If you've hired the right people, you've already got a responsive organization. And if your organization merges, acquires, divests, goes into a new line, et cetera, we are already, I used to tell people, I had someone come in and say, what you're doing is crazy. It's not crazy, it's Tuesday. This is what we do every single day. And we do. It's the nature of who we are. So if you've done all the things that you led up to, David, in this, you already have a responsive security organization.
When chaotic, responsive doesn't mean chaotic.
Oh, absolutely.
No, it means that you have all this stuff behind it. You've already laid out the plan. You lay out the structure. You lay out all the things that you're talking about. And again, you keep talking about it all in every forum we do, which is why I think the BTI is a good place for this, is it all comes back to the people. It all comes back to the awareness that the people need to have in order to achieve the change that they need to do. And so it sounds like a lot of your job is not always on the technical side. It's on moving the people forward, moving them through that change process.
Remember what he said, technology does exactly what you tell it to do. If my job was just technology, I wouldn't be gray, he wouldn't be bald. Am I lying? That's true. I could make technology work.
So I'm aware of the time, and I want to open this up because I know we have some people in the audience who are probably just as expert as the people up here, and we have some people who might be new to cybersecurity. So I think we have a wide variety. But I wanted to see if there was any questions for these guys while we have them. You got two of the best experts in the city sitting here. Anything that you've heard today you want them to expand on, or any questions that they brought up?
Or anything you want to contribute. I mean,
Please.
Yeah, or jump in
we
and,
only have so much.
anything they said that made you think they're wrong?
Yes, please.
Remember the two things I know. Yeah, first one's not moving. The others, please.
Yeah? No, just a listening audience. All right. That's fair enough. We're pretty good. Well, that's all the questions I had for you guys. Is there anything that you wanted to leave us with today? Any last thoughts?
Beforehand, I want to just pitch back here. Is there something we didn't cover that you want us to discuss? Seriously. Okay.
I think
Cool.
Glenn's
Oh,
going to
please.
say something. yeah.
You talked a lot about security, but one of the things you didn't talk about was putting in a governance policy as part of that security.
Yeah, and to be very direct, from my perspective, when I think about programmatic holistic security, it includes things like a governance policy. Security is not just technology. We talk about people and process as well. So if I don't have risk and compliance and governance processes and controls and that are implemented around that, security will fail. So where I would dovetail off your point, sir, is if you think this problem is just a technology problem, hopefully we've convinced you it's not. Because again, technology does what we tell it to do. You have to have those governance processes integrated with your existing processes, integrating with your existing controls, integrating with your existing risk framework, et cetera. If I'm talking about security by definition, I have to be talking about the governance piece as well, in my mind.
Oh, agreed, because without the governance, I'll just have the security department on the side. The governance helps provide that overlay, that umbrella that the entire organization, from the marketing, from HR, is involved and is being communicated, and the policies is impacting everybody. So how does, we have a governance board to explain that it's impacting everybody and how we can reduce the negative impacts, increase the positive impacts. So we got to have that in place. You can't just say we're doing security and not cover governance at the same time.
No, absolutely.
How good of a job do you think most companies do at overall data governance?
Well, you said data governance versus
Governance and governance in general, yeah.
versus governance in general. So let's go to the data governance question. How can I govern that which I haven't defined and haven't assigned value to? So if you go back to my earlier statements regarding what we are truly doing with data within the environment strategically, that should give you an idea as to what I think we're doing with data governance. If it's, to be more specific in terms of my answer, if it's not explicitly regulated data, I submit we are not governing it. We are going in, we're doing jazz hands and pretending to govern it.
For people who are just listening, he actually just did jazz hands. You're good at that. You have a cheerleading background. I can see. Yeah.
Any other questions? Please.
What are your thoughts on ransomware? I know it's a big topic these days, and depending on who you ask, some people say go ahead and pay it, some people say don't pay it, especially with the price of Bitcoin where it is now too. It's becoming more and more expensive, and so just want to get some quick thoughts on your thoughts around ransomware.
I'll go strategic. I'll ask you to go tactical. Strategically, whether or not to pay ransomware is a risk decision. Morally and ethically, I've been whooping up on bad guys and terrorists and other folks for 31 years. Paying off the bad guy just grates at me, plain and simple, and also sets bad precedent. I know some companies who've had and had bad success. I know some companies who've had and they've gone away. And I know some companies like Uber, and I'll put them out there because you've seen the headlines that are there. Ransomware in and of itself is not going to go away because it's a simple and highly effective attack. What you do with it is part of your incident management response process, and how you deal with it depends upon not only your own risk calculus, but frankly, what you have done as part of your programmatics to protect your environment. Theoretically, if you've already done the calculus and done things in your network and understand where your crown jewels are in data, the first 3 computers or servers that get hit and locked up with ransomware, you get concerned. Okay, flush and fill, take those offline, destroy the malware, upload, we've lost 6 hours worth of data, and tell the bad guys to pound sand, and you're done. Add to that, if you've done things in terms of your protection control posture, not only to teach people not to do the clicks to put the ransomware in your system from a phishing attack, maybe that probability is low. But if you're a flat network and it's highly invasive and you haven't backed up your data, your risk calculus may be different. the security guy in me always advocates I would rather be proactive about my protection posture to include my backup and recovery than to have to pay blackmail to anyone.
I like, you're right. There's no, I could not say, don't pay it. I can't say, pay it. It all depends. They steal my son, or they steal my Xbox 360. Now I had 40 hours of game saves in there, you know. So what did they steal, you know? From a security technical perspective, they got it, okay. How can I prevent that from happening again? Is there a mechanism? Some of it, I mean, when you look at how they're done, it's training the employees not to click these things in the first place. So we need to enhance security, enhance training and awareness for the organization as a whole, going back to applying that governance in place. So it's not should we pay into it or not pay into it. Okay, it's done. You know, now we got to stop it from happening again. Okay, and then from a strategic perspective, you're going to have to make those decisions on whether to pay it or not to gather that data. What's the value behind the data they did take? You know, some cases ransomware is not that bad. They stole it. Right now they're threatening to expose it. Some places they hack it and expose it. Okay, so you can say, okay, let's go ahead and not have them expose it. Let's go ahead and pay it. It depends on the organization, depends on your risk strategy, your strategy that you put in place. But for me, it's how do I prevent this from happening again? What is the lessons that I need to learn from this? I look at organizations that had it happen to them and how did it occur, so that we can enhance awareness across the board. I mean, that's really comes down to, again, human perspective. I need to really get that nailed down into these individuals. Don't do this. This is what happened to that organization. This is what happened to this organization. It could happen to us. I mean, it might be primed to happen to us in 2 weeks if we're not ready for it.
Any other questions for the guys while we have them?
Is this free consulting?
We also have.
My boss has it billed back there.
He's calculating.
I will say one other thing when you hire Roméo is that you will have a fashion consultant as well.
I didn't even bother to try. I knew Roméo was coming and said, I can't keep up. I'm just going to go like this.
I think we discussed you have 30 suits in
30-some
various
suits, yes.
various combinations, and he'll teach you how to do all that and make yourself look good every day. That's it. So, with that, I'm going to thank both for coming. I think for me, this has been one of the most educational things that I've done, just going through this process, talking to you guys, getting to know you guys, and doing the pre-interviews. I want to thank Wayne for stepping in and being our MSS co-host in this forum. I'll mention a couple things we got coming up. We have our supply chain forum next week, so that's going to be a very similar format, very similar caliber people. We also have next quarter, we're launching a workshop, executive workshop series, and one of those workshops we're doing features Dr. Roméo Farinacci. You want to tell us a little bit about what that's going to include?
A little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Just
So,
a preview.
Again, my niche is cybersecurity program development, design, and bringing it from the ground up for these small, medium-sized organizations who just don't know where to begin. So, a lot of things that I've done is trying to find a way to simplify how an organization can go about building that strategy and then bringing those pieces together. So, what we're doing in this workshop is looking at these six principles of cyber resiliency. So if you ever look it up. It's pretty cool, 6 principles. It really speaks to C-level down on what to think about or not think about. Again, one of the first bullets of that six principles is to stop looking at cybersecurity like it's insurance, and really start bringing it into your organization, and then how to go about making those changes and those transformations within your organization. So we're going to go through those 6 steps. We're going to go through what does a cybersecurity program entail, look like, how do I build it, how do I make it more mature if I have one, just what are some of the high-level concepts and then some of the steps that I can take within my organization. I won't go anymore.
Yeah, so that's a 2-day workshop, and we won't say anything, but I think it's right before spring training, if I'm right. Yeah. So, for those of you who want to learn a little cybersecurity, come visit in the warm weather in late February, and maybe catch some baseball or golf on the side. It works, but we don't necessarily say that that's a positive aspect of a boondoggle is the reason we do this. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be impressed with the stuff that Roméo has to say, and this is for C-level, VP level type of folks. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank everybody for coming. Thank our producer Glenn again, who comes in and does this on the early mornings for us, and thank Lori, who does all the work behind the scenes. So join us for our next forum, which is supply chain, and we'll sign off from there. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.